Hello again everyone, sorry it's taken me a bit longer than I was expecting to answer all of your questions. I've had a few things in my personal life that I had to focus on, as well as starting my new semester at university, and then I was going to record this earlier in the week, but Sunless Skies released and I took part in the charity stream challenge, and talking for 5 hours straight did a number on my vocal cords, so I've had to rest my voice for a few days. So again, sorry it's taken me so long, thank you for your patience, and thank you to everyone who left me questions. I'm going to answer the out-of-character questions first, then get into character, and answer the rest. Depending on how long this takes, I may have to split the video in two. Also, a few people asked me the same question more than once, so when I get to those questions, I'm just going to read the name of the first person I saw ask me it. So, without any further ado, let's begin. Our first question comes from Time Rider, who asks, how did you find Fallen London? Was it still named Echo Bazaar when you first played it? It was when I first played it, yes, but not when I got into it seriously. So the story behind this is when I first got into Fallen London, I discovered it through the extra credits video on non-combat gaming, and from a few people who I've talked to, that seems to be how a lot of they got into Fallen London as well. And it was still called Echo Bazaar at the time, but I didn't really get it. I was in a sort of very different headspace when it came to what games I liked back then. I was about 13 or 14 maybe. I don't know how old that video is actually, so it might be later than that and my memory might just be shit. Also, I apologise if I swear more often in this video, I'm completely unscripted. So, I first got into it through that video, but I didn't really understand it, and then a couple of years later, when Sunless Sea was in early access, my friend Ethan, now called Chunky Messiah, he was known as Sideways Thinker at the time, did a impressions video on Sunless Sea's early access, and I thought, oh, this looks quite interesting. Wait, some of this sounds familiar. I went looking and I found Fallen London again, and that's when I really got into it. That's when I really started playing it properly and it really sort of clicked with me. So it was called Echo Bazaar when I first played it, but it was Fallen London when I first started playing it properly. Our next questions come from Dr. Revenant. Their first question is, which game would be better lore-wise to start with, Fallen London or Sunless Sea? I would probably say Sunless Sea just because it's easier to get into than Fallen London. The gameplay is a bit more traditional, so as I say, it's easier to get into and therefore it's easier to experience the story, whereas Fallen London can take quite a bit of getting used to with its whole sort of semi-choose-your-own-adventure style and the actions limit and things like that, so I would say Sunless Sea, but Fallen London is better overall for lore. Their next question is, are you planning to do any other lore explanation series besides the ones you're doing at the moment? I have some tentative plans to do ones either focusing on the lore of vampires in the Old World of Darkness, the White Wolf tabletop setting, and some stuff to do with the Fallout universe, but that would only be focusing on the Black Isle and Obsidian developed Fallout games because I'm not a huge fan of the way Bethesda took the lore in Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, and the less said about Fallout 76, the better, if you ask me. But I don't really have anything beyond some tentative plans for those, I don't have any artwork commissioned for them, I don't have any scripts written, I don't even know where I'd really start with for those two. So I would say yes, I've got plans, but they're very early stages at the moment. And then they ask what my favourite piece of lore is, and assuming that they mean in Fallen London, I'm going to say the fact that the Masters are space bats, because bats are one of my favourite animals, and the fact that these great eldritch beings that have stolen or taken cities for thousands of years throughout human history are adorable sky puppies just makes me very happy. So our next couple of questions come from Ratgas Northwind, who asks, what has happened to our beloved Bazaar in Sunless Skies? It seems unlikely that it would give up London, even some of the Masters can be found in the High Wilderness. Well, the first thing I would like to sort of clarify is, yes, while you can find curators in the High Wilderness, some of them as enemies and some of them as NPCs, they're not the Masters that we know. From what I understand, they are the servants of another messenger, so another of the Bazaar's species, but they aren't the Masters of the Echo Bazaar. As for the Bazaar itself, I honestly don't know. I've not played enough of Skies to find out anything about where it's gone, and this leads into their second question, do you believe the sun is truly dead, or is she just hiding? I believe that in the timeline for Sunless Skies, yes, the sun is dead, but Sunless Skies isn't necessarily the canon timeline, it is one of many canon timelines. That's what I believe, and I believe Failbetter have confirmed something along those lines, but I'm not entirely sure, so don't take my word as gospel. Next, Goliath asks, how did you first get around to making YouTube videos about Fallen London lore? Well, to put it simply, I was just finishing my last year of secondary school, staring down a 4-month-long summer, and I was really bored and wanted a project to keep myself occupied, and I was really into Fallen London at the time, and also watching quite a lot of lore videos on the Soulsborne series, so Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne, and I just decided Fallen London doesn't have much lore content out there apart from the lore wiki, might as well do something on YouTube. Wrote up my script and put it up there. Never thought I'd get more than about 10 views, and here we are today, so that's how I got started, really. Our next question comes from This Is Not a Name, and they ask, why Fallen London? You are, I think, the only channel on YouTube that had the idea to make lore videos about this universe. I was quite surprised when I first discovered your channel, especially given that Fallen London is somewhat of a niche thing, and quite unconventional in both its setting and narrative. So, what I want to ask is, how did you discover Fallen London, and what drew you into its universe and lore? Well, we've already covered how I discovered the game, but what really drew me in was the fact that it was a sort of Lovecraftian setting that had a very human element to it. Because whilst I do love the kind of unknowable eldritch mystery and horror of Lovecraft's work, I do also like the fact that Fallen London really does add a whole sort of, as I say, humanizing element to it, with the focus on love stories and tragic romances that last for ages and stuff like that. It's all very appealing to me. So that's what really drew me into the lore to start with, and then just the little touches, like, as I've said, the masters being space bats, the fact that the rubbery men exist and are the most adorable and precious creatures that we must protect at all cost exist in the universe, and just like little interesting tidbits that you find while playing the game in the sidebars and things like that. That, and I really kind of like Gothic Victoriana settings, so basically all of that kind of drew me into it, and I decided to do Fallen London specifically because there really wasn't much lore content about Fallen London out there apart from the Fifth City wiki, so I just decided to go from there, I suppose. Next, and I apologise in advance for butchering the pronunciation of this name, Agostino Fragomelli asks, is there any character in the Neath you would love to take a cup of tea with and talk about anything? Well, those of you who know me outside of YouTube will probably be able to guess my answer, but Mr. Pages. Definitely Mr. Pages, because Mr. Pages is the best Space Bat Boy, and I won't hear a bad word said against them. These next few questions come from my good friend Mel Lawrence, who asks, do you have any long-term goals you have yet to achieve in Fallen London, for example becoming a paramount presence or renown grinding? Currently, I want to grind Scholar of the Correspondence, I want to become the Poet Laureate, which is also a massive grind, and become a Focused Brilliance, so 200 Watchful. Those are my 3 big goals at the moment. Maybe get into the monster breeding stuff, if I can figure that out eventually. Their next question is, what is your favourite exceptional story? Probably Flint, because it's just this huge epic and it leads us to the heart of the Elder Continent, which is somewhere you don't really go in the rest of the game. So it unveils a lot of mysteries about that, and it adds a lot of backstory to a lot of characters that I'm quite fond of. So I would say Flint, and I would highly recommend that people play it. The next question is, a lot of your other series are set in the Victorian era or thereabouts. Is that just to appeal to your Fallen London-centric audience, or is that your favourite time period? If it is, why do you think you are drawn to that part of history in particular? It's not my favourite overall period of history, that would be the Golden Age of Piracy, but it is one of my favourite eras of history just because I like to see how far the society in my country especially has changed in the span of 200-150 years. And the reason why I started with Victorian folklore is because, yes, I did think there would be quite a bit of crossover between fans of Victorian creepy folktales and Fallen London. And then the Archivist reads, I mostly focus on older stuff because I just tend to like a lot of older poetry. I've not really been exposed to more modern poetry or short stories. And then, obviously, the other series that I do is Portraits of Piracy, although there's only one episode at the moment. And that one is based in my favourite era of history. I am absolutely fascinated by the Golden Age of Pirates, and I have been since I was about 7 years old. And their last question is, if you could design your own correspondence sigil, what would the meaning be? Well, if I could design any correspondence sigil, it would probably end up being one that already exists, and that one is the one that was revealed a few days before Sunless Skies launched. That means two futures endlessly circling, because I think that's just a beautiful and poetic way of writing about the impact two people's lives can have on each other, and how you just end up coming into orbit of people in your life that you would never have expected to meet, and they completely change your world and your outlook on the future, and I just think that's a really beautiful and romantic notion. Next, Grimsy asks, do I enjoy making my videos, and how difficult are they to make? I do enjoy them. I wouldn't still be doing this if I didn't. They're not that difficult to make, to be honest. It's more along the lines of certain editing practices can be quite tedious, especially audio editing. Visual editing I don't mind so much because, well, there's a visual element that I can look at and I can try new things with my editing software. Whereas, like, when I'm editing audio, it's the same thing every time. It's just a lot of cutting out pauses for breath, removing takes that didn't really work, stuff along those lines. It just gets kind of tedious after a while, but no, I still do enjoy them and I have a lot of fun making them. The Gentleman asks, have I played and enjoyed Cultist Simulator by Alexis Kennedy? And yes, I have, but don't expect many lore videos on it, because I am utterly terrible at Cultist Simulator. I very much enjoy it. It's a fine game that I highly recommend you all go and play and check out if you haven't yet, but I am utterly useless at it. I just keep getting into death spirals, so I haven't actually got far enough to explore the lore, really. If by some miracle I somehow get good at Cultist Simulator, then I'll probably end up making at least one video on it at some point. Zupki asks, where in the Neath does the phrase delicious friend come from? It's something the Masters of the Bazaar say relating to love stories, and I just kind of picked it up because I thought it would be a cool way to introduce my videos. Mitch Kurt asks, where do you look for inspiration when writing? Are there any particular authors, directors, or YouTube content creators that you draw from or hope to emulate in some small way? When it comes to inspiration, just in terms of writing itself, my two biggest influences, I would say, are Terry Pratchett, who is my favourite author, and H.P. Lovecraft, just because of the sort of genres that I move in. For directors that I hope to sort of emulate or draw from, there aren't really many when it comes to like filmmakers relating to what I do. Mostly because my favourite genres of film don't really cross over with the kind of things I make videos on. I'm very much a fan of schlocky action movies. The Mad Max movies are some of my favourite films, and my favourite film of all time is The Italian Job, the original 1969 version that was never remade in 2003, and if I keep telling myself that, it will eventually become true. And as for YouTube content creators, quite a lot of the lore community around the Dark Souls series was something that kind of inspired me, and then again my friend Ethan, Chunky Messiah, with his Crisis of Character and Enigmatic Entity videos, was certainly an inspiration for my Faces of Fallen London and Victorian Folklore series. I'm going to leave a link to his channels in the description because he makes really good content and he's a good friend of mine, so it would be quite cool if some of you guys could go over there and check out his stuff. Next, Holly Scheel asks, I've noticed your character doesn't seem to like the revs in-game, but have you ever wanted to do the opposite of what would be in character, struggle to make a choice in character, or do you mostly have the same likes and dislikes as the Archivist? I've struggled to make a few choices in character, certainly, but not because I fundamentally disagree with the character I'm playing as. Me and the Archivist, we do agree on a lot of things, and it's kind of weird to describe it like that, as if he's his entirely own being when he's just a character that I play. But me and the character, we usually have the same likes and dislikes in-game, although I would say I'm slightly more sympathetic to the revolutionaries. I don't have the same blind hatred that Gabriel does. So yeah, I would say mostly we have the same likes and dislikes, but there are some areas where we kind of differ. The next few questions come from long-time commenter Swordsman Chagrin, who I am always happy to see things from. And their first question, which I thought was really sweet, was they just asked how I'm doing mentally, physically, all of that stuff. And I'm doing really well at the moment. I've got no real health issues to worry about, and mentally and emotionally, I'm in a really good place at the moment. A lot of things have been going well for me. Things are really looking up at the moment, and thank you for asking. And then they asked, do I intend to branch out more outside of the projects I'm already doing? On the channel, not so much. I'm just, at the moment, going to focus on expanding the series I already do make. So I suppose you could call that branching out, just by investing more time into them. But overall, I don't have any massive plans for anything new for the channel other than the tentative stuff I've mentioned before. And then they ask if I have any projects outside of YouTube that I'm working on. Yes, me and a friend are currently working on a story together on... Well, it was originally going to be a short story, and then we got about 6,000 words in and realised it's not going to be a short story anymore. I won't give away too many details, but it does involve secrets, intrigue, spying, and men in very pretty dresses. So keep an eye out for that. I may mention it in updates on the channel once my co-author and I have decided it's in a state where we're ready to show it off more to, well, more people. But other than that, no, I don't really have many other projects outside of YouTube going on at the moment. Then they ask, I wish I could support you, but don't, as of now, have the financial means to donate to your Patreon. Is there anything else I could do to support you? And I just want to say to everybody out there who maybe thinks about supporting me financially but are struggling with their own finances or don't have the means to support me financially, please don't worry about it. You don't need to support me financially. This at the moment isn't a career for me. And yeah, I would like to make, like, you know, a living off YouTube, but I also realise it's very rare to get to that point. So you really don't need to worry about donating to my Patreon. And as for other things you can do, liking my videos, commenting on my videos, sharing them, all of that, it helps with the YouTube algorithm, which gets my videos seen by more people, which helps grow the channel, which ultimately makes things better for me in the long run. Then, our next question comes from Selkuth Coddywampler, which is quite possibly the greatest YouTube name in the history of mankind, and they ask, what do you do outside of running the Bespectacled Archivist? You don't have to answer this one in its entirety, or indeed at all. I know it's a lot and might be quite personal. Please do not feel pressure to answer this one if you don't want to. Well, as I've mentioned a few times in update videos and the like, I'm a history student at university in my 3rd year, and then outside of that, I'm a member of a couple of tabletop role-playing groups. Just last night, in fact, I was in a Vampire the Masquerade Dark Ages game, and we ended up firebombing a fortress with Greek fire. That was quite fun. So I play a few tabletop games, I play some board games, and other video games. I read quite a lot, and I write. Those are my main hobbies, I would say. Then, Sana asks, which are the best storylines in Fallen London, and which ones do you think one absolutely must play? I would say the stuff at the Shuttered Palace regarding becoming Imperial Artist in Residence is a lot of fun and I would highly recommend. Fiduci's Fighting Rings, because Fiduci is a fascinating character, and the heists in the Flit. Those are the ones that I would highly recommend. And any of the Ambition stories, actually. I really enjoyed Heart's Desire, although it's currently unfinished at the time of recording. But I am really hoping that it gets finished soon because I want to play The Marvelous. And then they ask, and you mentioned Darkest Dungeon, are there any other games you would recommend? Just talking about sort of smaller PC and indie games, the original 2 Fallout games are an absolute must if you enjoy RPGs. Pretty much anything Obsidian's ever put out, apart from really the South Park games, but that's because I don't like South Park very much. I've been playing quite a lot of a game called Battle Brothers recently on Steam, which is kind of a turn-based tactics RPG where you control a mercenary company in a Germanic dark fantasy world, which I am quite fond of, but that one, I can see why quite a few people wouldn't be quite fond of that one. It's just one of those games that really clicked with me. Obviously pretty much anything Failbetter's put out. And what else have I been playing recently? And then moving away from indie games, I've been playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2, and I also very much enjoy the XCOM games. Random Commoner then asks, if you were to design the perfect game, what would be the gameplay, the lore? Would it be mostly a narrative game like Fallen London, or completely different? You see, this is a tough one because I would need to put in quite a lot of thought before I could give you the entire details of the lore of a world for a game, but just talking in basics, it would be a single-player, story-focused RPG semi-open world, but not quite open world. Think more along the lines of the Borderlands games, where you've got several large hub areas to walk around in, rather than one huge sprawling open world, because I think that's kind of been overdone at this point, and I wouldn't mind seeing scale being reduced back, kind of similar to what Obsidian's doing with the Outer Worlds, which is a game I am very much looking forward to. And beyond that, as for the lore, it would either be alternate history or post-apocalyptic, because those are my two favourite settings for video games. I'm not entirely sure about the lore. As I say, I would need to put in quite a lot of thought. As for the gameplay, I would like there to be an option to complete the game without having to kill anybody, because I really miss that being an option in games, where you can just get through an entire story by basically being a very good liar and convincing everybody that, no, really, I'm supposed to be here. Now give me the access code so I can go and kill the giant super mutant master by detonating a nuke under his chair. You know, stuff like that. I miss the original Fallouts, basically. Then they ask what were your most influential video games while you were growing up. I would say probably the original Fallout games, again, Red Dead Redemption, which was the game that truly convinced me that video games could be art. The first two Mass Effect games, everything after that didn't happen. And then just for sillier stuff that I played that really got me into gaming when I was quite young. Me and my brother played a lot of the original Crash Bandicoot games on our PlayStation 1. Yeah, I would say those are my most influential games growing up. Then, Tana of the Fawn Project asks, can I reach out to you about a project I'm part of? Sure, go ahead. Probably the best way to reach out to me is through Twitter. The link is in the description of all of my videos. I do think you need to be following me to DM me though, so apologies if that's inconvenient, but I just don't want open DMs after somebody offered to let me join the Illuminati in exchange for my docs, because I'm not stupid enough to give my docs out on the internet. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me. As I say, Twitter's probably the best way of doing it, as I believe YouTube recently changed their messaging system to make it very awkward to actually message somebody on YouTube. And our second to last of the out-of-character questions today comes from Fade and Kill, who asks, what are some of my favourite books? The Discworld series by Terry Pratchett are all masterful, especially the City Watch and Death Sub series I would highly recommend. I'm quite a fan of H.P. Lovecraft, especially Shadow over Innsmouth and At the Mountains of Madness, and then the Gaunt's Ghost Warhammer 40k tie-in novels by Dan Abnett, because I kind of really like military sci-fi, and they're some of the best tie-in books for Warhammer 40k, so if you're at all interested in 40k, I would highly recommend getting into the lore with the first book, First and Only, by Dan Abnett. And our final out-of-character question comes from Orilath, who asks, what is your favourite Fate-locked story? I'm keeping this separate from exceptional stories because I've already covered that, and there are some story branches that are Fate-locked that don't necessarily count as exceptional stories. So I would say probably the stuff in Flute Street with the Rubbery Men, because the Rubbery Men are adorable and must be protected at all costs, and I really enjoy the lore that you learn down there. So that's all of the out-of-character questions. Thank you once again to everybody who asked. And now I'm going to get into character, and we'll start with the in-character questions. Thanks once again, and I'll see you all again soon. Welcome, delicious friends. It seems you are here to celebrate with me this coming together of so many fine acquaintances. I understand that many of you have questions. So come closer, my friends, ask away, and I shall answer to the best of my abilities.